I'll call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee. I'm Councilmember Reich. I chair the committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Johnson, Palmisano, and Fletcher. We are a quorum, and we'll proceed with today's agenda. Today's agenda has 14 items, including public hearings, consent items, and discussion. I will go through the consent items, and then also I'll make a motion for item 12 on the discussion, because we have a very full reporting day, and we'll be moving that to another time when we are less busy. Item 2 on the consent is the capital project closeouts and appropriation and revenue adjustments within the city's capital project, enterprise, and grant funds. Item 3 is the request for proposals for parking meter equipment and management systems. Item 4 is the request for proposals for planning and engineering services for Hennepin Avenue, and that goes from Lake Street West to Douglas Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. Item 5 is the mutual aid agreement with other public works agencies for training, preparation, response to natural man-made disasters. 6 is the cost participation cooperative agreement with the Hennepin County for North Loop Reconstruction Project. 7 is the speed limit ordinance setting public hearing for December 3rd. 8 is the Southwest Wyndham Residential Street Reconstruction Project. That's the designation, cost estimate, and that public hearing will be set for January 21st. Item 9 is the contract amendment with Custom Products and Services for Stone Pros LLC for sidewalk parking, lot snow clearing, removal, and ice control services for special service districts. Item 10 is the contract amendment with Mayor Contracting Incorporated for Hennepin Avenue Water Main Replacement Project. Item 11 is the traffic zones, restrictions, and controls, receiving and filing the 2019 third quarter report. And then item 12 is a discussion item that we will move and refer to staff for a later date. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I move all the items as described. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries, and we can now move to the public hearing. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Our sole public hearing today is for the Hoyer Heights Residential Street Reconstruction for project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. The information will be presented by Jeremy Strelo with Surface Water and Sewer. I will note this is a multi-divisional, multidisciplinary project, and I'll introduce Jeremy now.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jeremy Strelo. I'm an engineer with the Surface Water and Sewers Division of Public Works. And today I'm here presenting for public hearing for Hoyer Heights Residential Street Reconstruction, City Project number 2317, PV 131. The proposed project consists of reconstruction of several streets in the Hoyer Heights neighborhood. Elements to be included as part of the project include select sidewalk replacement, ADA compliant pedestrian ramps, intersection bump outs, boulevards with trees, new pavements, new curb and gutter, and utility improvements as needed. The project also plans to include stormwater management improvements to improve stormwater runoff quality and help mitigate stormwater flooding within the project and surrounding areas. The total project cost is $2.1 million. The total street reconstruction assessment is $351.91. This is based on the 2020 uniform assessment rates and the influence area method. Those rates are $2.66 for non-residential and 88 cents for residential. The assessments are payable over a 20-year period. The rest of the funding sources are $1.49 million in net debt bonds and $400,000 in stormwater revenue. City staff has conducted several outreach activities throughout the planning and design phase of the project. A pre-assessment meeting to provide an overview of the project, discuss planned improvements, and answer any questions related to the assessment method and process was held on November 4th with 16 people attending that meeting. Today, Public Works is asking City Council to pass resolutions ordering the work to proceed, adopting the special assessments, authorizing sale of the assessment bonds, authorizing abandonment and removal of areaways in conflict with the project. That concludes my presentation, and I will stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions per the staff presentation? Seeing none, I will then open the public hearing. Anyone signed in? Anyone wish to come forward and give comment? Anyone wish to come forward? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. This is my first public hearing, so I'm a little nervous. My name is Carolyn Trevis. I'm a resident in that neighborhood. I live at 3660 Taylor Street, which is, I believe, Lot 2. I was not at the hearing or the meeting last week on November 4th, but I know many of my neighbors were, and I don't see any of them here today, so I think I'm kind of representing a number of them that live in that neighborhood, including folks who live on the street next to me, which would be, I believe, 36 and a half, and my neighbors right across the street, and some folks that live on the Fillmore part of the project. We have several concerns about this project, and I'm not sure how many of us were actually consulted about this before the design of the project was made, but we have a couple of two major concerns about it. The first is that there are many neighbors who have one-car garages in this neighborhood. And there's a big concern about reducing the number of parking spots in this neighborhood, primarily because of the introduction of the curb bump outs. And we know that that's going to reduce the number of parking spots in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is a very nice neighborhood right now. We don't think that there's really a need for any beautification, if that's the aim of this. We think that preserving multiple parking spots for our neighbors who only have one-car garages is very important. We also know that with the bump outs, it's going to be much more difficult to plow snow in this neighborhood, which is already a little bit tricky. We are on the north side of railroad tracks, and so the streets are right now a little bit of a challenge to plow, so we just think it's going to make that more challenging. We also are questioning the widening of the boulevards. What is the need for this? Again, it's a very nice neighborhood now. We don't think there is a need for beautification if that's the primary goal. I walk in this neighborhood frequently, so I am one of the pedestrians that will be affected by this, and it's a very walkable neighborhood. There's nothing wrong with it the way it is right now. So there's also not a lot of pedestrians that walk. It's not, one of the reasons there aren't a lot of pedestrians is because it is on the north side of the railroad tracks. So if you're going to walk, you're more typically going to walk down Fillmore south and not so much in the neighborhood that I'm talking about, which is the north side of the tracks. There's also not a problem with traffic or fast cars, if that's part of the reason that we're doing this. I saw on the website that one of the reasons was to calm traffic. There isn't a lot of traffic in the neighborhood. Again, it's a small section of the neighborhood, again, on the north side of the tracks. And so we really question why some of these modifications are being made. That's all I have. Thank you.
Ernest, thank you. And we'll have staff respond to the functionality of what's proposed. Anyone else wish to come forward? Anyone else wish to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and perhaps staff can speak to the notion of the functionality of bump outs and wider boulevards, particularly as it pertains to snow plowing, as that was specifically referenced. And as we know, plowing and storage go hand in hand. Obviously, beautification is a motivation. I'm very pro beautification myself, but that's not the only reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In relation to why these bump outs are being installed with this project, the bump outs provide several benefits, including not just reducing pedestrian crossing distances, but they also reduce the amount of impervious surface and add more green space to the neighborhood. In several locations, there are stormwater management BMPs that are being incorporated in these bump outs. And these stormwater management BMPs not only provide flood mitigation, but also provide stormwater quality treatment as well. Bump outs are a proven method throughout the city and have been incorporated with on other projects with success.
And my understanding is that stormwater management was a significant part of the reconstruction project itself in this area.
That is correct.
And then in terms of the trade-offs, how much parking will be lost, estimated? Because there is a trade-off here.
So there will be some parking loss during the layout phase of the project. There was a parking study conducted. They identified the number of parking stalls that were warranted on within the project area, and that number has been met with the proposed layout.
And that you could share that with the citizen if they wanted to see the analysis, if they missed the presentation, because not everyone made it clearly to the
That's correct,
community
yes.
meeting. Well, I appreciate that, just so people can understand the purpose and then the trade-offs and how you analyzed it. Any questions from staff? Councilmember Gordon? No? Oh, okay. Seeing that, the public hearing's closed. I think we had some good back and forth, and I will move the item before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We now can go to the discussion area, moving straight to 13 as 12 has been deferred, and that is the Zero Waste Action Plan. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm very pleased to introduce this next discussion item, which is a presentation on the Zero Waste Action Plan for 2020 to 2022. This is an area that I would really like to highlight the staff, both David Herberholz and Kelly Kish especially, are incredibly dedicated to this topic of reducing our waste and really changing how we think about our waste stream. This follows policy work that was completed in 2017, community engagement that was completed through 2018, and is also being done in a coordinated way with Hennepin County, who adopted some of their goals and actions in 2018 as well, 2018 and 2019. So with that as a backdrop, I'd like to introduce Dave Herberholz, who will kick off the presentation. He's the Director of Solid Waste and Recycling, and Kelly Kish will also assist. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Dave Herberholz. I'm the Director of Solid Waste and Recycling for the city, and I'm joined by Kelly Kish, our Recycling Coordinator for the city. We're going to combine to make a brief presentation on a 3-year action plan for zero waste. It's been a while since we've had this conversation, and we're ready to take some initial steps and wanted to bring this item to the committee before the end of the year and kind of set some things in motion for the next 3 years. So just a little overview, history of the zero waste plan, some of the objectives, and then an overview. This timeline here shows that going back to June of 2015, when the council adopted recycling and composting goals and carries out through the approval of the zero waste plan, and now our introduction of a 3-year zero waste plan. As Robin said, we've done an awful lot of community and stakeholder outreach in the past few years, which we felt was very important to have that dialogue and implement some of that discussion into this plan. We'll continue to engage. We've engaged before when it's in draft form, and we'll continue to engage as we start implementation of these items. Why zero waste? And it goes back to some of the pretty aggressive goals that the city had set. If you remember back, the state set some goals, and we actually went a little higher for the goal for 2030 at 80%. So the idea that here is that, we're looking to do the diversion, keep some of the valued materials out of the landfill and waste energy facility, reduce our greenhouse gases, create jobs, increase economic activity. And our Division of Public Works was directed to take the lead, but we are partnering with Health, Regulatory Services, and CPED on some of the initiatives that are included within this action plan. So an idea of the stakeholders. So these are the sectors that we're focusing on. As you're aware of, my division within Public Works, we're responsible for the residential solid waste collection and management. Then we've got the commercial and industrial multifamily sectors, institutions, our own city internal, and then public space. And the size of these circles here are assumptions of the solid waste volume within those sectors. So as you see, the commercial, industrial, and multifamily is a pretty large area. So how do we get to advancing our zero waste activities? And I think it's very important. This slide kind of shows that you have to have the education and outreach involved with the access for opportunity, and that will increase the materials recovered. Our focus for the action plan for the next 3 years, primarily a lot of benchmarking. So we don't have the data out there for some of the other sectors. We do a very good job on what we do residentially within the city, but it's going out there, working with stakeholders, with the state MPCA, on establishing those baselines, get a better understanding of what the existing conditions are, and then moving beyond that, really promoting incentives, resources to where those sectors that need some assistance will obtain that. And once again, working in partnership with Hennepin County on a lot of the resources. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly Kish, our recycling coordinator, for the finish of this presentation.
Briefly, Councilmember Gordon.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask one quick question. You talked about just getting baseline data. Then the slide right before that, you showed these 5 circles, and you mentioned assumptions. There they are. So do we know how much waste is coming from the commercial, industrial, multifamily sector at all, or if?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we really don't. We have, the state has done a little more aggressive approach to having reporting of data done by the commercial sectors and the businesses. I think they have yet to really establish a true grounding of what the volumes really are out there. We just know, and we know and we assume, and I think we're fairly accurate in knowing that that volume of that sector is much larger than what our residential area is.
Do we get better cooperation from the institutional sector in terms of how much waste they're generating?
I think we do, for the fact that we work very close with the park board. We are involved somewhat with the public schools. So I think that information, maybe it's a smaller pie as far as the number of stakeholders in there. So I think the degree of accuracy and involvement of those sectors is better than the larger expanse of the businesses. So I think, yes, we feel that we can make headrows there a little quicker than the commercial sector.
And so they're not required to tell us how much waste they're collecting from the city, the haulers or the producers of that waste?
Not us, but the haulers and the businesses are required to provide reporting to the state.
Okay, but that not necessarily based on what they collect in Minneapolis?
It would be included within that bigger area.
Okay.
And then the task at hand is to try to identify what portion of that is Minneapolis based.
Thank you for letting me drill it.
No, good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Kelly Kish. I'm the recycling coordinator. I'm happy to be here to talk about some of the action items that are identified in the 2020 to 2022 Zero Waste Action Plan. So some very important things that we think are needed across all sectors are going to be, making sure that we are not just focusing on recycling, composting, and other organics management methods, but making sure that we are promoting the waste reduction, the reuse, and repair, because that's actually where we're going to see the biggest environmental bang for our buck, is not generating the waste in the first place. As Dave had mentioned, making sure that we're promoting existing resources such as Hennepin County's technical assistance, their free signage, their site visits will be really helpful to businesses, multi-units in actually implementing these programs to give the people working there or the residents living there the actual opportunity to be diverting more materials from their trash. And Hennepin's actually made this piece a little bit easier for us with the changes to their solid waste ordinance number 13, which were just adopted back in 2018. They're going to actually require that haulers put a particular sign type on all dumpsters outside of the businesses they provide service to, which includes multi-units. And they're going to require that businesses themselves and the management companies of multi-units use similar styled signs inside the buildings themselves. So again, great partnership that we have with the county to help advance some of these activities. Now, real quick, so of all of the sectors that Dave showed a couple slides ago, commercial, multifamily, institutional, city, internal, there are strategies for all of these within the plan itself, but we just wanted to do a couple highlights here in the presentation to not take up too much time on the residential and the commercial sectors. So for the residential sector, we want to, and are planning on doing a capture rate study. And what that is we're actually going to pull garbage, recycling, and organics carts from individual homes, sort them out to find out of 100% of recyclables, where are they going? If 90% of them are going in the recycling, that's really great. If 60% of them are going into a different container that isn't the recycling, we know where we have the greatest opportunity to improve our education and outreach and help meet our diversion goals. We are currently working with a consultant to evaluate the South Transfer Station. That is where residents currently can bring extra garbage, construction demolition debris, some scrap metal, large items. But with that study, we're looking at not only making the operations more efficient, but identifying different material types that we can add to the materials accepted so that we can, again, be able to divert more materials from the trash. And to really close the loop on our organics recycling program, we want to create a voucher system in which residents who participate in the program will have the opportunity to get access to some of the compost produced. Now, these are just a couple of the strategies. There are more included, but these are some of the ones that I think we're really excited about in the next couple of years. And now for the commercial and multi-unit sector, the biggest piece is that our current ordinances, we have a commercial recycling ordinance, we have a multi-unit recycling ordinance, but they are not actively enforced. So working with the fire inspectors and working with reg services to make sure that these are actively enforced when people are there will again help make sure that the people in those buildings have the opportunity to be participating and diverting waste from the trash. Right now, the hauler license does not help us identify which haulers we actually need to be receiving data from. You could have a license for any number of things, from just providing roll-off services to only moving hazardous waste to doing commercial to doing residential. So we want to modify that hauler license to actually say, I am picking up commercial recycling, I am picking up commercial garbage. So we know that we only really need to be working with about 30 of the 87 licensed haulers to actually get the data that we're looking for to be able to track our progress towards meeting our diversion goals. David had mentioned the hauler reporting to the state. They did make some modifications from the first to the second year that will make it easier for the commercial haulers to actually report, hopefully by city. So this is the first year in which that system has been updated, and we're hoping that that data will give us a better snapshot and again provide us, the best bang for our buck in terms of moving forward with our time and energy. And then lastly, some examples for both businesses and multi-units for organics recycling. We hear a lot from larger buildings that people want to participate in programs, so the plan includes in it different strategies to require a building to provide organics upon, let's say, 10-15% of the residents living there. Or if there's a brand new building going up that has chutes for garbage. Right now they're required to have a chute for recycling, but there's no requirement for anything related to an organics diversion program. And we know that organics are about 40% of the weight the waste that an average Minnesotan generates. So to consider thinking about, if we're building large buildings with chutes, that they should probably have an organics management plan in place as well. And then just for, the quick and easy, we have in there also to add some additional drop-off sites for areas where there are high concentrations of large apartment buildings as well.
Pause for a question from Council
Yes.
President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to really express my appreciation for this work that you talked about going forward to 2020. I hear a lot from constituents who are living in multifamily buildings about their desire to participate in waste diversion, especially organics composting. And a lot of folks are really going out of their way. As you know, the Wedge has provided a community partnership in partnership with the Whittier Alliance and local residents. So folks are walking their organics over to the Wedge and really, again, going out of their way. So I think there would be high interest in the community for this opportunity. And also, I think as we look forward toward implementation of Minneapolis 2040, these ideas about what we might require or incentivize in new construction is really timely, because as we think about making it easier to build more housing, we also want to make sure that we are holding those new buildings to the standards that we need to in order to achieve our sustainability and zero waste and climate change goals. And so this is a great example of one of those themes that might get rolled into any kinds of new requirements we might have for new buildings. So I just wanted to really highlight those two pieces and express again my appreciation.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
So, Councilmember Bender took most of my thunder, but I also hear a lot about how people are really interested in apartment buildings doing organics, and I'm also concerned about what happens downtown with lots of the restaurants and all of that, and what's being provided and what isn't. Also, we're working on a sustainable building policy on the city itself, where we might recognize that if we're giving any funding for a project, we could have some higher standards and requirements. So it would be great to work this into that. I did have one question, just curious, because you seem to know a lot about these things. Are there any buildings right now that have organic chute that got put in just because the builder wanted to do that, and so they have 3 chutes instead of 2? And maybe you could cheer about them for a second.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon. Hennepin County would honestly be better to speak at who is continuing to use those chutes. I do know of some buildings that have built them in. However, the wet nature of organics and putting that down a chute, the ability to clean those chutes is not necessarily easy. And so I don't think that adding another chute for organics is necessarily the agreed upon best practice for adding organics in large buildings. So the plan says to evaluate a strategy. It does not specify a chute for that exact reason. So
I'll push back at that on a little. I don't understand why having all your food waste in the regular garbage chute would be just hunky-dory then. Because obviously we're sending yucky, wet, food waste down a chute already and have been for decades. But are you aware of some places that actually put in 3 chutes? Or do we think it's never been done?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, there are places within the city limits that do have 3 chutes, yes.
Well, so that would be good. So we'll make sure to talk to them and see how it's working.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so just as I had mentioned with the residential sector, there are other strategies for commercial multifamily commercial multifamily and institutions. We have actually them broken out into 3 separate sections. So there is a set of strategies for each within the action plan itself. And then all of the action items that are in here are ones that we do feel we can accomplish between 2020 and 22 with current resources. And as Dave had mentioned again, that we have incorporated a lot of these things based on our resident and stakeholder engagement. And we will continue to engage them throughout the process as we move forward to make sure that their concerns are heard, addressed as best as possible, and the way in which these strategies rolls out is a system that's going to work for everyone. So with that, we will stand for any questions that you have.
Any further questions for staff, given the presentation? Obviously, we had some great dialogue and great questions and comments from the colleagues that I think reinforce the interest we have in this area and how it touches on other areas of our policies. I would just highlight the engagement and education work. Sometimes doesn't get highlighted, but I've seen you out there doing that work, and it generates that excitement and that participation that really drives the numbers at the end of the day. And so keep that good work up as well. And with that, we have a receive and file before us. Any further discussion? See none, all in favor of receive and filing report, say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. Thank you. We can now go to our final discussion item. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am very pleased to introduce this next item, which is our draft of the American with Disabilities Act Transition Plan for Public Works. The city has a policy related to ADA work, and that policy is citywide. We are a subset and are required to and take a lot of pride in being very articulate about the public works plan for ensuring that we are ADA compliant. The work has been going on for the last year, led by an extraordinary team of planners in transportation planning and programming. Kelsey Fote is a transportation planner who has been leading this effort, and Kelsey's going to walk you through the draft plan.
Good morning.
Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kelsey Fote. I'm a transportation planner with the Transportation Planning and Programming Division in Public Works. I'm here today to present the draft ADA transition plan for Public Works. The plan is now open for public comment until December 27th. After we close that comment period, we'll be making revisions to the plan and bringing it back to council in early 2020 for your consideration. A couple things to cover today, a little bit of context, some of what we heard through public engagement for the plan, a few of the plan recommendations, and some next steps. Just a little bit of background on the ADA. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a federal law. It was passed in 1990. It prohibits discrimination, ensures equal opportunity for persons with disabilities. It's a wide-reaching federal law with important local impacts as well, as more than 1 in 10 Minneapolis residents identifies as having a disability. As part of these regulations, local government agencies with 50 or more employees are required to have an ADA transition plan. The purpose of the plan is to identify barriers in the public right-of-way, establish priorities, and develop an implementation plan for removing barriers. ADA transition plans are by design living documents. They are meant to be a planning and programming tool that is updated periodically. This plan has 5 chapters. The first provides an overview of the federal regulations and how the city meets these mandates. The second focuses on what we heard through public engagement. The third is called a self-evaluation and outlines barriers that were identified through this process. The fourth chapter sets up a prioritization methodology. And the last chapter provides an overview of the methods of how barriers are and will continue to be removed through this process. There are many departments involved in ADA planning at the City of Minneapolis. Neighborhood and Community Relations, or NCR, manages a citywide plan that comprehensively addresses programs and services at the city. That plan is called the ADA Action Plan. The plan has 2 separate and supporting plans that support the ADA Action Plan. One of these is the ADA Transition Plan for Public Works. It focuses on access to the city's public right-of-ways. Another similar plan is managed by Finance and Property Services. It manages physical access to city-owned and leased facilities. Additionally, NCR staffs an advisory committee called the Minneapolis Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities. The committee advises staff and city officials on matters pertaining to the ADA and ways in which the city could be more accessible for persons with disabilities. This draft ADA transition plan for Public Works covers 4 types of infrastructure that are crucial for providing access in the public right-of-way. These include pedestrian curb ramps, accessible pedestrian signals, or otherwise called APS, sidewalks, and street crossings. Within Minneapolis, there are several other public agencies that control right-of-way or own infrastructure within the city of Minneapolis. Agencies like MnDOT, Hennepin County, Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, they also have their own transition plans and are responsible for providing accessible infrastructure along their right-of-ways. This is not the first ADA transition plan for Public Works. We had an earlier plan in 2012. This plan will serve as an update and replace that plan. The 2012 version was never formally adopted, and due to some upcoming requirements in the federal regional solicitation application process, we need to have an approved plan to move forward through that process. Since the 2012 plan, there's been a number of updates that are notable to make in an update to this plan. We have a new subset of data on our pedestrian curb ramps across the city that we can now analyze and add into this transition plan. And it also ties in well with several other planning efforts that are coming along. There's several ties to other plans within the city that are existing, such as the ADA Action Plan and that Property Services Plan. There's also underway plans such as the Transportation Action Plan and the Vision Zero Action Plan that have ties to this plan. The ADA plan is an important foundational and complementary plan to these upcoming transportation plans. These three plans work in tandem and provide a transportation network that promotes safety, accessibility, and aligns with our city goals. The draft ADA transition plan was developed through consultation with 3 advisory committees at the city, including the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and the Committee on Aging. A number of user groups that work directly with people with disabilities were interviewed and invited to participate in the planning process as well. We worked closely with partner agencies to collaborate on best practices and coordinate on ADA efforts. And we formed 2 internal staff working groups, a technical advisory committee and a steering committee, to provide technical expertise and guide the development of the plan. Input to the plan was collected through an open house, a survey, conversations with advisory committees and others, user groups and interested individuals. While more than half of survey participants identified as having a disability, many others expressed the importance of this type of infrastructure for aging populations, for people with temporary injuries, for people pushing strollers. Of those that identified as having a disability, there was a wide range of different types of disabilities reported, from physical disabilities to vision or hearing related, challenges from anxiety, autism, mental health, among others. It's important for many folks. We asked people to tell us what the biggest obstacles were when walking in the city or rolling in the city. People who identified as having a disability identified sidewalk conditions as the most challenging, followed by pedestrian curb ramps, narrow sidewalks, and obstructions. There are quite a few that answered others. Some of these responses indicated that snow and ice on sidewalks posed challenges, as well as safety concerns with drivers not yielding to pedestrians, or street designs that had wide intersections and long crossings. We then asked people to indicate where we should prioritize improvements first. The majority of responses focused on those areas that needed the most physical improvement to be accessible, and followed by high-density residential areas, areas of concentrated poverty, and commercial areas. We also looked at feedback solicited through outreach from the Vision Zero engagement process. Vision Zero participants indicated that they felt that streets were most unsafe for people with disabilities, and indicated that primary concerns are around winter maintenance, narrow sidewalks and obstructions, and inaccessible curb ramps. We also got important input through the Transportation Action Plan engagement process. Participants expressed a need to establish a consistent street design throughout the city, include considerations for people with disabilities and emerging mobility options and technologies, and ensure that design and maintenance practices support access to destinations. The 3rd chapter in the draft plan focuses on identifying accessibility barriers of the public right-of-way. There's a series of recommendations coming out of this chapter, mostly evaluating new inventory data that we have on accessible pedestrian signals and expanding upon existing data for the conditions of our sidewalks. Continuing to monitor and make improvements for emerging designs and technologies as we come across them, and continue to work on improving access issues for seasonal and temporary barriers to accessibility, such as pedestrian detours, winter maintenance. Several of these topics are further discussed and will be discussed in the Transportation Action Plan. The 4th chapter outlines a prioritization framework for addressing barriers. It uses criteria from the 20-year Streets Funding Plan that are focused on pedestrian mobility, safety, and community demographics to prioritize infrastructure improvements through an equity lens. Infrastructure improvements are further categorized by how closely they align with ADA criteria, with more emphasis placed on factors that public feedback indicated are larger barriers to using the infrastructure. For curb ramps, people indicated that ramps that are too steep, too narrow, or have significant lips at the curb line are most challenging to use. These deficiencies are weighted more heavily in the prioritization methodology. The chapter applies this prioritization methodology to the city on a citywide basis to prioritize intersections across the city. In this map, the intersections most in need of improvements are highlighted in orange and yellow. Many of these are at T intersections where the receiving ramps were often not built historically. Recommendations in this section of the plan focus on keeping the prioritization methodology updated as new data becomes available and new criteria are used. The last chapter of the draft plan focuses on how barriers are removed through various programs and processes. Using the self-evaluation as a baseline where we are today, the prioritization framework is where we should prioritize investments. We've outlined 23 different action steps to pursue to meet existing federal requirements, align with best practices, and continue to improve accessibility in the public right-of-way. Again, the draft plan is available for public comment until December 27th. We have a few ways for people to comment. There's an online survey on our website. We're hosting an open house on December 16th. And they're welcome to reach out to me through phone or email to leave comments on that plan. Again, we will make revisions following that comment period and plan to bring a proposed plan back to council in early 2020.
Any questions for staff? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if, as part of this, we're looking at plans to defend the infrastructure that we have built from utilities and other sort of destruction of some of the ADA components that we've put in. I've had constituents pointing out several ramps that were previously good that have been torn up by a utility and don't seem to be getting replaced in a timely way or restored to their functionality. So I'm worried that we can build all this infrastructure, but then we also need to make sure we have a plan to not lose ground.
Absolutely. We do have recommendations also in the plan to improve our monitoring and tracking of where work is being done in the right-of-way. So we definitely are looking into where we can improve in that way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report and the whole plan, and I confess that I haven't read through it all as carefully as I should have, but I think it's very good, very well written, and now will give us something to respond to. I was a little bit curious about the issue of accessibility during the winter. When I was reading the actual report, I saw that 93% of respondents said that snow and ice in the winter is a major problem, but it didn't appear in the bar graph. It was lumped into other conditions, so it didn't. So reading the report, it seemed like a more significant concern than it did in the slides, and that's just to note that, and maybe why I'm making a deal out of it right now. I think it is significant. I do know there's a recommendation looking at addressing that too. I think by and large, things can work really well in Minneapolis for people to get around in terms of the sidewalks and accessibility for a lot of the year, but we still have these months often it's an enormous barrier, especially for people who use a wheelchair or something like that, just to get around. And I think you highlight some of that in the report, and you talk about traffic signalization, how people can't even get there to push the button. And of course, we also have lots of intersections that you can't get a walk sign unless you can push the button, which is that and winter maintenance are two pet peeves of mine. So I appreciate this opportunity to reiterate them again for all of you to hear in this public forum and to see how we can work to address them together as we move forward with this action plan. So fantastic work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm happy to follow up. I had some, if that is easier or better, but I had a couple of questions about the prioritization criteria, and I'm particularly interested to know if there's anything in there that captures sort of like pedestrian orientation of the neighborhood, whether it be population density or proximity to transit or proximity to destinations, if that's captured in those prioritization criteria or not.
Chair Reich, members of the committee, there are some criteria pulling from the 20-year streets funding plan criteria that do identify population density, destinations, places with concentrated poverty. Some of those key pedestrian factors for mobility and destinations are included through those criteria.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate how we're balancing that with race equity and economic equity and transportation access. Because a lot of places that have lower population density or other, lower density of destinations are also places that we want to make sure that are accessible. And, but, then again, we also have folks choosing to live in neighborhoods that are more walkable if they have like a mobility issue or they're transit dependent. So I think that balance is important, and I appreciate that it's captured there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
I just found this really interesting paragraph I'd like to read aloud as it's in the report. Snow or other winter maintenance issues was a major barrier for 93% of respondents with disabilities and 80% of respondents without disabilities. The need for improved winter maintenance on sidewalks and crossing streets was mentioned numerous times in the comments for every question and generated more comments than any other topic.
I think that makes the point rather soundly and thoroughly. Any other comments or questions? Really appreciate the work. I will echo. I think Councilmember Fletcher said it was a very good presentation of information, very well organized. And so, if anyone has any doubts that we have a plan moving forward and what the contents of that plan are, I think we have it from today's presentation. So, really appreciate that. And yeah, this in so many ways is the pinnacle of our work, of the plans that this coordinates with. Not only does it coordinate with, but if you think of our complete streets policy, our kind of our guiding policy that hovers above all of the other ones, this is the pinnacle of that work, quite literally. And we are, I think, the city's judged by how we do this work more than almost any other category. And I think Councilmember Gordon might be a great partner in terms of creating graphs for the future report. He's really good ideas about highlighting data and information that could be. Well, we can have your own graph. Whatever information we want in that. And so, but seriously though, great work, and seeing no other discussion before us, I will move the item, receive and file, of our ADA report. Any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay, that carries, and we are completed with today's agenda. Thank you.